When Taehyung whispered, "If you marry, don't look for me," Jungkook's entire world collapsed in silence. The words didn't come with anger. There was no shouting, no dramatic outburst, no tears streaming down his face. It was said softly, almost gently, like a secret that had been carried for too long and finally slipped out of a tired heart. But somehow that made it worse. Much worse. Jungkook froze mid-step. He was standing in the doorway of Taehyung's apartment, rain still dripping from his jacket, one hand gripping a small bouquet of white lilies he had bought on the way. They were already slightly crushed, the petals bent under the pressure of his shaking fingers. He had rehearsed this moment the entire ride there. The apology, the explanation, the confession he had been delaying for months. But now none of those words existed anymore. Taehyung stood with his back turned, facing the large window overlooking the city. The storm outside painted everything in blurred reflections and soft shadows. The apartment was warm, quiet, almost peaceful, as if nothing life-changing had just been said. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was suffocating. "You're not serious," Jungkook finally whispered, his voice barely holding together. "You don't mean that." Taehyung didn't turn around. He simply stood there, arms folded loosely, eyes fixed on the distant lights blinking through the rain. His shoulders were tense, but his breathing was controlled, too controlled for someone who had just shattered another person's heart. "You're getting married, Jungkook." The words landed like thunder. Jungkook felt his chest tighten, his throat burning as if he had swallowed something sharp. "I didn't even know you found out." Taehyung let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "I found out through a staff member, not from you, not from the person who said we'd never keep things from each other." Jungkook's gaze dropped to the floor. "It's not what you think," he said weakly. "I was going to tell you." "But you didn't." Taehyung finally turned around. His eyes weren't angry. They weren't even tearful. They were just tired. The kind of tired that comes from waiting too long for something that never arrives. "You let me hear it from someone else," Taehyung continued. "Do you know how that feels? To hear that the person you've built your world around is planning a future you were never invited into." Jungkook took a step forward. "I thought I was protecting you." "From what?" Taehyung asked quietly. "The truth, or from having to choose between me and the life everyone else wanted for you?" The room felt smaller with every word. "This isn't just about you marrying someone," Taehyung said. "This is about the years I waited. The years I convinced myself that we had something real, even when you never said it out loud, even when it hurt." He stepped closer, standing only inches away now. Jungkook could feel his warmth, could see the way Taehyung's jaw trembled slightly as he tried to stay composed. "So I'll say it once," Taehyung whispered. "If you go through with this marriage, don't look for me again." The bouquet slipped from Jungkook's hand. The flowers hit the floor softly, petals scattering like apologies that came too late. "You don't mean that," Jungkook said desperately. "You can't mean that." "I do," Taehyung replied, his voice finally breaking. "Because I can't keep holding my breath for you anymore." Outside, the rain grew heavier, tapping against the glass like a countdown neither of them could stop. Jungkook stood there, unable to speak. His face was unreadable except for the devastation burning in his eyes. Taehyung didn't wait for a response. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the hallway, leaving Jungkook alone in the quiet, drenched not in rain, but in regret. For the first time in years, Jungkook didn't know where to go. The next morning, Jungkook stood outside Taehyung's door again. This time there were no flowers. Only guilt. "I just wanted you to understand why I didn't say it sooner," he said through the door, his voice hoarse. "I stayed up all night thinking about everything, about you, about us." Inside, Taehyung sat on the edge of his bed, phone buzzing endlessly beside him. Messages from friends, from staff, from people who already knew more than they should. The engagement news had leaked. The world was already talking, but Taehyung stayed silent. Please, Jungkook continued. At least let me explain. You can hate me, you can yell at me, I don't care. I just can't let it end like that. The door opened slightly, just enough for one tired eye to appear. Why now? Taehyung asked softly. Why do you always come back when it's too late? Jungkook swallowed. Because I thought staying silent would protect you, from gossip, from pressure, from being dragged into something you never asked for. You didn't protect me, Taehyung replied. You left me out, you made me feel replaceable. You're not replaceable. Then why didn't you fight for me? The question hit harder than anything else. Jungkook had no answer. There was a long pause. Then Taehyung spoke again, quieter now. I don't even know who she is. I don't know her name. I don't know how long you've known her. All I have is rumors and silence. Jungkook hesitated. Her name is Hana. My mother introduced us. It wasn't romantic. It was expected. 2 families, 2 reputations, 1 decision made for me. Taehyung's eyes narrowed slightly. Then why did you say yes? Because part of me hoped you'd stop me. The words slipped out before Jungkook could stop them. Taehyung laughed bitterly. So you wanted me to beg? No, Jungkook said quickly. I wanted you to say something, anything. I didn't know where we stood anymore. You didn't try, Taehyung whispered. You assumed. Silence fell again. Heavy, raw, unfinished. So what now? Taehyung asked. You're still engaged. Are you asking me to wait again? Jungkook looked down. No, I'm not asking you to wait. I'm just asking you to remember that I never stopped caring. Taehyung slowly began to close the door. Wait, Jungkook said suddenly. I called it off. The door stopped. What? I told my family last night. I said I couldn't go through with it, that I was lying to myself. Taehyung stared at him, disbelief filling his eyes. You did that for me. I did it because I realized I've been living on autopilot, making everyone else happy but myself. Taehyung's expression softened, but it wasn't relief. It was confusion. You think this fixes it? No, Jungkook replied, but maybe it's a start. They stood there, not the same as before. Not strangers either. Just 2 people, surrounded by the wreckage of everything they never said. And for the first time, the space between them didn't feel completely hopeless. The rooftop was quiet in a way that only high places in big cities ever were. Not silent, but distant. The noise of the world existed somewhere far below, reduced to a soft, meaningless hum. Cars moved like slow streams of light. Buildings stood tall, glowing with windows that held thousands of lives completely unaware of what was happening above them. Taehyung arrived first. He stood near the railing, hands in his coat pockets, eyes fixed on the skyline. The wind brushed against his hair, cold but gentle, like it was trying to wake him from a dream he wasn't sure he wanted to leave. They used to come here during training days. Back when everything felt impossible, but somehow simpler. He didn't turn when he heard footsteps behind him. I didn't think you'd come, Jungkook said softly. Taehyung didn't respond right away. He just kept looking at the city. You said it was important, Taehyung finally replied. So I'm here. Jungkook stepped closer, stopping a few feet away. He looked different, not styled, not polished. No cameras, no managers, just him, standing there with dark circles under his eyes and a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Jungkook spoke. Do you think we still have a chance? Taehyung let out a slow breath. I think there was a version of us that never had to choose between honesty and safety, he said. But I don't know if that version still exists. Jungkook nodded slowly. That's fair. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded envelope. This arrived yesterday. Taehyung took it, unfolding the paper carefully. It was a formal letter. An official invitation. Solo campaign. Global branding project. Title: The unscripted chapter. Taehyung frowned slightly. What is this? It's my exit, Jungkook said quietly. From what? From the image they built for me. The carefully controlled version. The one that never says too much, never feels too much, never chooses the wrong thing. Taehyung looked up. And you're telling me this because? Because you're the reason I realized I don't know who I am anymore. The wind picked up, fluttering the edges of the paper. They want this campaign to be about authenticity, Jungkook continued. About my real story, not scandals, not labels, just me. Taehyung's eyes narrowed slightly. And does that story include me? Jungkook didn't hesitate. It does. Taehyung looked away, jaw tightening. You know what will happen, he said. People will connect the dots, they always do. I know. And when they do, they won't leave me alone. Jungkook stepped closer, his voice lower now. Then I'll stand in front of you this time, not behind you, not pretending you don't exist. Taehyung laughed quietly, but there was no humor in it. You say that like it's easy. I know it's not. Then why are you doing this now? Jungkook stared at him for a long moment. Because I'm tired of being brave only in private. Taehyung felt something shift in his chest at that. Not hope. Not yet. Just recognition. They stood there, the city stretching endlessly around them, both aware that whatever they were talking about was bigger than just the two of them. My team wants me to do an interview, Jungkook said, to control the narrative. And you agreed. I said I'd only do it if I could choose the questions. Taehyung's gaze sharpened. And your answers? No names, no drama, just the truth. Taehyung studied his face. You're doing this to protect me. Partly. And the rest? Jungkook's voice softened. The rest is for me. Taehyung looked down at the letter again. You're changing everything, he murmured. Jungkook nodded. I already did. The studio smelled like coffee and cold metal. Taehyung sat cross-legged on the couch in the corner, watching Jungkook through the glass of the recording booth. The headphones were on, eyes closed, voice low and raw in a way Taehyung had never heard before. This wasn't a song for charts. It wasn't designed to trend. It sounded like a confession that had been waiting years to exist. I walked through your silence like it was a hallway of memories. Hopping every echo would take me back to your voice. The last note faded. The producer gave a small nod, but Jungkook didn't move. His hand tightened slightly around the mic stand, like the words had finally caught up with him. Taehyung felt his chest tighten. He hadn't planned to come. He told himself he needed distance, space, control. But when he heard Jungkook was recording the main track for the unscripted chapter, something pulled him here anyway. Jungkook stepped out of the booth, eyes meeting Taehyung's through the glass. For a moment, neither of them spoke. You wrote that recently, Taehyung said. Last week, Jungkook replied, after the rooftop. It sounds honest. That was the goal. I'm tired of hiding behind metaphors. Taehyung crossed his arms. You know what people are saying online already. I know. They're guessing who it's about. Some are dangerously close. Jungkook's jaw tightened. Let them guess. And when they start dragging my name into it, then I'll speak. Taehyung turned away slightly. You said that before. I know, but this time I mean it. Taehyung looked at him. You've changed. So have you. Silence stretched between them again. Then Taehyung asked the question he had been holding since the rooftop. Do you still love me? The room felt like it stopped breathing. Jungkook didn't blink. I never stopped. Taehyung swallowed hard. Then why does it still feel like we're on opposite sides of a glass wall? Because we built it, Jungkook said. To survive, not to separate. Taehyung looked down. I don't know how to exist in your world openly. Then let me build a quieter one, Jungkook replied, just for us. Taehyung closed his eyes briefly. It wasn't that simple. It never had been. The message arrived 5 days later. From Jungkook. Are you free tonight? I need to tell you something. Taehyung stared at the screen for a long time without replying. They hadn't spoken much since the studio, not because of a fight but because the silence had become necessary. A place to breathe, to think, to feel without being watched. But this message felt different. Urgent. That evening, Taehyung found himself walking toward the rooftop again. Jungkook was already there, leaning against the railing. You came, Jungkook said. You said it was important. It is. Jungkook reached into his coat and handed him his phone. On the screen was a trending post. Speculation. Secret muse. Leaked lyrics. Hidden relationship. Someone had uploaded a rough cut of the song. The comments were already exploding. They're connecting it to you now, Jungkook said quietly, directly. Taehyung felt his stomach drop. You said your team had it under control. They thought they did. Someone sold the file. Taehyung exhaled slowly. So what now? I'm going live tomorrow. Taehyung's eyes widened. Are you serious? No denials, no vague statements, just me. You're asking me to walk into a storm you created. No, Jungkook said. I'm asking if you'll let me finally take responsibility for it. Taehyung looked at him, something breaking and rebuilding at the same time. You're still asking for permission to be honest, he said quietly. Jungkook froze. If you believe in your truth, Taehyung continued, then speak it. Stop calculating how much of me is allowed in it. Jungkook's voice dropped. I never wanted to turn you into a secret. But you did. The words hit harder than any argument. Then prove it, Taehyung whispered. Speak like I'm real, not a rumor. Jungkook nodded slowly. I will. Taehyung watched as Jungkook opened his camera app. No script. No filters. Just him. And for the first time, Taehyung realized the next day wouldn't just change Jungkook's career. It would change both of their lives forever. Jungkook didn't sleep that night. He sat alone in his studio apartment, lights off, phone resting on the table in front of him like a loaded weapon. The city outside was alive, glowing, indifferent. Somewhere out there, millions of people were scrolling, talking, speculating about a story they didn't understand, about feelings they had never lived. And somewhere not far from him, Taehyung was probably awake too. Thinking. Overthinking. Wondering if tomorrow would finally turn him into something he never asked to be. The camera app was still open on Jungkook's phone. All he had to do was press one button. Just one. But for years, he had built his entire life around not pressing that button. Around silence. Around careful words. Around pretending that some truths were too dangerous to exist. He picked up the phone, hands slightly shaking, and finally hit record. Hi, Jungkook said, his voice calm, almost too calm. I've stayed quiet about a lot of things for a long time, some because I was scared, some because I thought it wasn't anyone's business. But today I want to speak plainly, not to confirm rumors, not to create headlines, just to tell the truth. He paused, taking a slow breath. There was a time in my life where I loved someone very deeply. It wasn't a public love. It didn't need to be, but it shaped me. It inspired my music. And even when I walked away from it, it stayed with me. His eyes flickered just for a second. That love made me better, and I'm no longer afraid to say that. He stopped the recording. That was it. No names. No labels. No explanations. Just the truth. Jungkook stared at the screen for a long moment before uploading it. The moment it went live, his phone started vibrating nonstop. Messages from his manager, from his team, from numbers he didn't even recognize. He didn't open any of them. The only name he was looking for wasn't there. Taehyung. The world reacted exactly the way Jungkook expected. And worse, some fans cried. Some celebrated. Some accused him of lying. Some demanded details he refused to give. Headlines danced around the confession without ever fully touching it. Jungkook opens up about past love. Idle hints at hidden relationship. Fans speculate secret muse behind new campaign. Forums exploded with theories. Old photos were dragged back. Lyrics were analyzed word by word. Every interaction Jungkook had ever had with Taehyung was suddenly re-edited into a new story. And still, nothing from Taehyung. No message. No call. Not even a typing bubble. That silence hurt more than the backlash. Jungkook sat on the couch in his studio, laptop open but muted, watching the chaos unfold like it was happening to someone else. He had told the truth, but he still didn't know if it was the right truth. The knock came around 11 a.m. Soft. Careful. Jungkook stood immediately, heart pounding. When he opened the door, Taehyung stood there. Hood up, mask on, eyes unreadable. "Can I come in?" Taehyung asked quietly. Jungkook stepped aside without a word. Taehyung walked in slowly, looking around the familiar space like he was seeing it for the first time. The same couch they used to fall asleep on. The same table where they once ate cold ramen at 3 a.m. after practice. Jungkook didn't sit. Neither did Taehyung. They just stood there, facing each other, with the entire world burning somewhere outside the walls. "You said everything," Taehyung finally spoke, "but you left out one thing." Jungkook's chest tightened. "What?" "You talked about love in the past tense." Jungkook froze. "I said it that way because I was still trying to protect you," he admitted. "I didn't want to drag you into something you didn't ask for." Taehyung's voice was soft but fragile. "So this was closure for you?" "No," Jungkook said immediately. "It was honesty, but I was still scared of saying the part that matters most." Taehyung looked down for a moment. Then back up. "I didn't bury what I felt," he said quietly. "I just stopped watering it. I thought it would fade, but it didn't. It just waited." The room felt heavier. Not painful. Just full. Jungkook took a step closer. "I still love you," he said. "Not as a memory. Not as something I moved on from. I love you as someone I never stopped choosing in my head, even when I didn't have the courage to choose you in real life." Taehyung's eyes glistened, but he didn't cry. "You should have said that yesterday," he whispered. "I know." "Why didn't you?" "Because I wasn't sure if you wanted to hear it anymore." Taehyung let out a shaky breath. "I wanted to hear it for years." Silence fell again. Not the kind that pushes people apart. The kind that forces them to stay. "The video was brave," Taehyung said, "but the world took it and turned it into a story that already ended." "Then let me say it now," Jungkook replied. "Not for them, just for you." He walked toward the window and pulled the curtain aside slightly, letting soft daylight fill the room. Then he turned back to Taehyung. "I love you," present tense. "Not as a chapter I closed, but as someone I'm still choosing, even now, even in all this mess." Taehyung's lips parted, but no words came out. For a moment, he just stood there, looking at Jungkook like he was trying to memorize him again. Then he whispered, "You finally sound honest." Jungkook smiled faintly. "I finally am." They didn't talk about the future that day. They didn't define anything. They didn't promise anything. They just sat on opposite ends of the couch, not touching, but no longer pretending the space between them meant nothing. The internet kept screaming. But inside that room, something was quiet. For the first time in a long while, neither of them felt like a secret. Not to each other. Not anymore. But even as that fragile calm settled in, both of them knew the hardest part was still coming. Because telling the truth to each other was one thing. Telling it to the world was something else entirely. The next week felt unreal. Not dramatic in a cinematic way, but overwhelming in the quiet, suffocating sense, like standing in a room where every wall was slowly moving inward. Jungkook's schedule exploded overnight. Emergency meetings, brand calls, PR strategies, statements that were drafted, revised, erased, and rewritten again. Everyone wanted control. No one wanted truth. Taehyung watched it all from a distance. Not because Jungkook shut him out, but because Taehyung chose to step back. He needed to see what kind of world Jungkook was actually walking into now. And more importantly, whether there was space in that world for someone who didn't want to be a headline. They met again 3 days after the confession video. Not on a rooftop this time. Not in a studio. Just a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city, hidden between old bookstores and closed flower shops. The kind of place with chipped mugs and music that was always too soft to recognize. Jungkook arrived late. Not because he wanted to, but because someone always needed something from him now. "Sorry," he said as he sat down, exhaustion visible in his eyes. "They wouldn't stop calling." Taehyung stirred his coffee slowly. "You don't have to apologize. This is the life you chose to open." Jungkook smiled weakly. "And you're already sounding like someone who regrets being part of it." Taehyung didn't deny it. "I don't regret you," he said. "I regret the noise that comes with you." Jungkook looked down. "It's louder than I thought too." They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the hum of the cafe. Then Jungkook spoke again. "My team wants me to do another interview, this time more direct, not about you, just about boundaries. They think it'll calm people down." "And will it?" Jungkook exhaled. "No, but it'll make sponsors feel safer." Taehyung's lips curved into a small, tired smile. "So this is the part where honesty becomes a brand again." "Yeah." Jungkook leaned back slightly. "They want me to say that the love I mentioned is completely in the past, that I'm focused on my career, that people shouldn't read too much into it." Taehyung looked at him sharply. "And what do you want to say?" Jungkook didn't hesitate. "That some things are private but not erased." Taehyung studied him. "Those two sentences mean very different futures." "I know." Taehyung looked out the window. A couple passed by holding hands, laughing about something simple and stupid and unimportant. No cameras, no theories. No one cared who they were or what their story meant. For a moment, Taehyung envied them more than anything. "I don't want to be hidden again," Taehyung said quietly, "but I also don't want to be consumed." Jungkook nodded slowly. "Then let's draw a line." "What kind of line?" "Public silence, private truth." Taehyung frowned slightly. "That sounds like another version of a secret." "No," Jungkook replied. "It's a boundary, a choice, not something we're forced into." Taehyung thought about that. For years, everything between them had existed in shadows, in corners, in moments stolen between schedules and excuses. This felt different. Not perfect, but intentional. "So you'll let them believe what they want," Taehyung said, "and we stop correcting the world." Jungkook nodded. "I've spent my whole life explaining myself to strangers. I'm tired of letting them decide what my feelings mean." Taehyung's voice softened. "And if one day you want more than this?" Jungkook met his eyes. "Then I'll ask you first, not the internet." That answer stayed with Taehyung longer than anything else Jungkook said that day. The interview aired 2 nights later. Jungkook sat alone in a minimal studio, dressed simply, no dramatic lighting, no background music. The host asked the question everyone expected. Are you currently in a relationship? Jungkook smiled politely. I'm in a phase of my life where I'm learning to protect what matters to me. Some things are meant to grow quietly. Not everything needs an audience. Does that mean the person you mentioned in your video is still in your life? Jungkook paused. Some people never leave your life, he said. They just stop belonging to the public version of it. The internet exploded again. But this time, the tone was different. Less aggressive. Less demanding. More confused. And strangely, more respectful. Taehyung watched the interview alone in his apartment. He didn't feel anxious. He didn't feel scared. He felt something unfamiliar. Relief. Jungkook hadn't erased him. But he hadn't exposed him either. For the first time, the line between them and the world felt real. Not fragile. Not imaginary. Just firm enough to breathe. They didn't see each other for almost 2 weeks after that. Not because they were avoiding each other, but because life finally started moving at a pace that didn't revolve around panic. No emergencies. No trending scandals. No urgent messages. Just normal days. And one night, without planning it, Jungkook showed up at Taehyung's place with takeout and no cameras. Is this allowed? Taehyung asked as he opened the door. Jungkook smiled. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. They ate on the floor like they used to. Old habits. Old jokes. New silence. Not heavy. Not painful. Just comfortable. At some point, Jungkook leaned back against the couch and said, You know, for the first time, I don't feel like I'm running. Taehyung looked at him. From what? From myself. Taehyung nodded slowly. And I don't feel like I'm waiting anymore. For what? For you to become brave. Jungkook smiled softly. Guess we met in the middle. Taehyung didn't answer. He just leaned his head lightly against Jungkook's shoulder. Not for the world. Not for a story. Just because, for once, they didn't need a reason. The calm didn't last. It never does when your life exists half in reality and half in other people's expectations. 2 weeks after Jungkook's interview, the campaign for the unscripted chapter officially launched. Billboards appeared in major cities. Teasers flooded social media. His face was everywhere, clean, minimal, almost painfully honest. And with visibility came pressure. Not just from fans. From the industry. From investors. From people who didn't care about truth, only about risk. Taehyung felt it before Jungkook even said anything. Jungkook's replies became shorter. Calls got postponed. Meetings ran late more often than before. Not because Jungkook was pulling away, but because the world was pulling harder. They met again in the same quiet cafe. Jungkook looked tired. Not physically, he was used to that. Emotionally. The kind of tired that comes from constantly negotiating your own existence. My agency wants to restructure my contract, Jungkook said, stirring his untouched drink. New clauses, image protection, lifestyle expectations. Taehyung raised an eyebrow. That sounds vague. It means they want more control again, over what I say, where I go, who I'm seen with. Taehyung's fingers tightened around his cup. And you? I told them no. Taehyung looked up, just like that. Not exactly. I told them I'd think about it. There it was. The sentence Taehyung had learned to fear. I'll think about it. Because it usually meant, I don't know how to fight this without losing something important. They're offering me the biggest deal of my career, Jungkook continued. Global reach, creative freedom, but with conditions. Taehyung didn't ask what the conditions were. He already knew. So what happens if you refuse? Taehyung asked quietly. Jungkook hesitated. They won't drop me, but I'll become difficult, less supported, less promoted, slower opportunities. Taehyung nodded slowly. So the price of being honest is invisibility. Not invisible, Jungkook said, just less protected. Taehyung looked at him for a long time. You're scared, he said. Jungkook didn't deny it. Yeah. Not of losing your career, Taehyung added. Of choosing something you can't undo. Jungkook swallowed. What if I choose wrong? Taehyung's voice was calm but steady. You already did, years ago, when you chose safety over us. The words weren't angry. They were simply true. Jungkook looked down. I know. Silence filled the space between them again. But this time, it wasn't gentle. It was heavy. Real. So what are you asking me? Taehyung finally said. Jungkook looked up. I don't want to lose you again, but I don't know how to keep you without burning everything I've built. Taehyung exhaled slowly. For a long time, he said, I thought loving you meant being patient, being quiet, being understanding. He looked Jungkook directly in the eyes. Now I think loving you means not shrinking myself to fit into your fear. Jungkook's chest tightened. I'm not asking you to come out publicly, Taehyung continued. I'm not asking for statements or labels or headlines. Then what are you asking? Jungkook whispered. I'm asking you to stop making decisions where I only exist in the consequences. That sentence hit harder than any ultimatum. Because it wasn't a threat. It was a boundary. Jungkook sat back, staring at the table like it might give him an answer. What if I lose everything? He asked quietly. Taehyung's voice softened. Then you'll finally know what's actually yours. Jungkook laughed weakly. You make it sound easy. It's not, Taehyung replied. But neither is loving someone who's always half-owned by the world. They left the cafe without touching. Not because they were angry. 3 days later, Jungkook stood in a conference room surrounded by people in suits. Contracts on the table. Smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Words like brand safety, public image, long-term strategy floating around like polite threats. His manager leaned in. This is your moment, don't complicate it. Jungkook thought about Taehyung. Not his face. Not his voice. But the way he had said. Stop making decisions where I only exist in the consequences. Jungkook picked up the pen. Then slowly set it back down. I'm not signing this version, he said. The room went still. One of the executives frowned. You're rejecting the clause. I'm rejecting any contract that tells me who I'm allowed to be seen with. Silence. Uncomfortable. Risky. This could cost you, someone said. Jungkook nodded. I know. Are you sure you want to do this? Jungkook thought about all the years he had been brave only in private. About how honesty had always come last. About how love had always been something he postponed. Yes, he said quietly, for once I'm choosing first. He stood up, left the room, and for the first time in his career, he didn't know what would happen next. But strangely, he wasn't afraid. That night, Jungkook showed up at Taehyung's door again. No messages. No warnings. Just him. Taehyung opened the door surprised. What happened? Jungkook looked at him, eyes steady. I said no. Taehyung blinked. To what? To the contract, to the conditions, to the version of me that keeps asking for permission to exist. Taehyung stared at him in silence. Then quietly asked, and what now? Jungkook stepped closer. Now I don't know what my career looks like. I don't know how the industry will treat me. I don't know how much harder everything is about to become. He took a breath. But I know one thing. Taehyung waited. I don't want a life where loving you is something I negotiate. The room felt like it shifted. Not dramatically, not explosively, just fundamentally. Taehyung's voice was barely a whisper. You chose. Jungkook nodded. Not the world, not the brand, not the fear. He looked at Taehyung with a small, real smile. I chose you in real life, not just in my head. Taehyung didn't answer immediately. He just stepped forward and wrapped his arms around Jungkook for the first time in a long, long while. No cameras, no stories, no consequences. Just two people, finally standing on the same side of the choice. And for the first time, neither of them felt like they were waiting for the other to disappear. The next morning didn't come with fireworks. No headlines announcing Jungkook's rebellion. No dramatic statements from his agency. No public consequences yet. Just sunlight through the curtains and the quiet weight of a decision that couldn't be taken back. Jungkook woke up on Taehyung's couch. Not because anything romantic had happened, but because neither of them had wanted to sleep alone. Taehyung was already awake, sitting on the floor near the window, scrolling through his phone. They're already talking, Taehyung said without looking up. Jungkook sat up slowly. About what? About your contract. Someone leaked that negotiations collapsed. Jungkook rubbed his face. That was fast. Taehyung glanced at him. Do you regret it? Jungkook thought about the conference room, the pen, the silence. No, he said. I'm just adjusting to the fact that I finally chose something without a backup plan. Taehyung smiled faintly. Welcome to my world. They sat there quietly for a moment. Not anxious. Not excited. Just aware. For the first time, Jungkook's future felt unscripted in a real way. Not branded. Not marketed. Not controlled by anyone else's expectations. And it terrified him. But it also felt honest. The backlash came slowly. Not in loud scandals, but in subtle shifts. A scheduled appearance quietly disappeared from the calendar. A collaboration was postponed indefinitely. A sponsor asked for clarification about personal direction. Jungkook's team tried to stay calm. It's temporary, his manager said over the phone. They're testing your limits. Jungkook looked at Taehyung across the room as he listened. For once, he didn't feel like he had to apologize for existing. Let them test, Jungkook replied. I'm done pretending I don't have one. After he hung up, Taehyung asked, Are you okay? Jungkook nodded. I think so. I just didn't realize how much of my life was built on being agreeable. Taehyung's voice was gentle. You were trained to be loved by everyone. That's heavier than being hated by a few. Jungkook laughed quietly. You always say things that make my problems sound poetic. It's my only talent. They shared a small smile. But beneath it, both of them knew the real test hadn't arrived yet. Not the industry. Not the fans. The real test was time. 2 months later, the noise had faded. Not because people forgot Jungkook, but because nothing dramatic had replaced the story. No scandal. No denial. No new confession. Just silence. And in the internet world, silence is the fastest way to be replaced. Jungkook's campaign performed well, but not explosively. His presence was still strong, but less constant. For the first time in his career, he had days with no schedule. No meetings. No cameras. Just normal hours. At first, he didn't know what to do with them. Then one afternoon, he found himself sitting in Taehyung's kitchen, chopping vegetables badly. Taehyung watched him. You're going to lose a finger. Jungkook frowned at the knife. No one ever taught me how to live without staff. Taehyung laughed. That might be the most honest thing you've ever said. They cooked together. burned the rice, ate it anyway. And Jungkook realized something strange. He felt useful, not admired, not adored, just present.